Hello, hello. Happy holidays for those of you watching this in December, or happy holidays whenever you're watching this. My name is Heather G, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. This is Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast. And the podcast is all about all things confidence. So we cover this really big range of topics right here. And this episode is just going to be little old me because I am going to be wrapping up season 2, which means that we are 1 year old almost. And I'm so excited. Some of our podcast episodes have been co-hosted with my co-pioneer Ryan Francis, some of them with my co-pioneer Adrian Spencer, and we are so delighted to be able to appreciate the guests here that have spent their time, shared their expertise and their stories and their vulnerability. And so we wanted to wrap up the season to appreciate and to celebrate them. And for you who are watching or listening, depending on where you get your podcast or vodcast episodes, we wanted to be able to share a little snippet of what each of the podcasts in these last 6 months or so have been about, so that you can go and seek out that episode and get involved and have a listen and get in touch if it serves you. And so Confidence Through Cabaret, for those of you who are new here, is all about uplifting and supporting the building of unshakable confidence, whether that's in your personal life, your work life, or your stage life. And so what happens is that we tend to have confidence in some areas of our life and not so much in another area of your life. For me, before COVID, I was very confident in my work life, in corporate training for over 25 years in my own business. And, I really was comfortable in that coaching and training arena. And then, going into personal life, lots of personal stories and circumstances and things that I've shared on previous podcast episodes happened, and it really shattered my confidence. And so I needed to take that, and this is what we suggest you do, that confidence that I had in my work life, and shift that into personal life where we want to grow confidence. So we always say in Confidence Through Cabaret, start from where you're strong, and then look at what's working there, and then expand that out to build confidence in other areas of your life. And be realistic about confidence. Confidence isn't one of those things that is a straight line. You get there to that goal and then it continues forever. It's one of those things that goes up and down. Also co-hosted sometimes in our podcast is our dog Chase, who has now found a toy to chew on, and always perfect timing. So if you can hear odd sounds in the background, that is what's going on. Okay, let's get on with introducing you or reintroducing you to each of our podcast episode guests, and a little bit about what each of them does. So we started this season in July in 2021 with an episode that we had recorded sometime before. And I have no idea, no recollection why we didn't kick off earlier with this podcast, because it is a beautiful episode. And that is an episode with Gina Marino Bell. Gina read to us her book Tears and Tulle. She now also has Tears and Taffeta, which is a gorgeous story about being born with this wonderful energy, these beautiful colors, and really, when times get tough, being able to tap into those. And I hope I'm paraphrasing that in an okay way, but I love the story. Go check out the episode, and you can listen to the whole book, and definitely check out Tears and Taffeta as well, the new one. So what I learned from Gina that I keep near to me is the statement, even when, especially then. And it goes like this, or at least it does for me. Hopefully I'm saying this right, Gina. It's even when, and then something, and then, I'm still, and, or I am, and especially then. So for example, even when I am overcommitted and struggling to fit everything in that I've said I would do, I am still deserving of self-care and I am still worthy, especially then. And I love the especially then because, that's the point when it's when we need the most self-compassion, when we need the most um, support from ourselves. Go check out the episode. We talked about so many things involving confidence, but the story really sort of sets the scene for that episode. And then we had another recorded earlier episode, which Ryan Francis and I recorded, which was Betty Wang talking about feng shui. And I had worked for a major corporation who was very involved in feng shui, so I had a really basic understanding. But Betty Wang took it out of the park into so much more. And I know that Betty will be sharing on her socials about what the key directions and numbers and focuses are for 2022 as that shifts as well. So keep an eye out for that. But go and have a look at the episode if you wanted to know more about energy and flow. And we are energy, so that flow is so important. Then we had Jimmy Clare, and Jimmy was so wonderful in sharing his story and the message about overcoming adversity. And what I love is the reminder that Jimmy shares about, getting stronger every day, small steps to get stronger every day. And, we talked about finding your voice and finding your space, which of course we're all about in Confidence Through Cabaret. um, and and really, how Jimmy overcame adversity and the lessons for the rest of us in overcoming adversity. And then our wrap up for July was the beautiful Maggie Periton, who is a leadership coach. And we talked a lot about a theme that came up several times this season, which was about making that shift from corporate to online business. Now, for me personally, having always been a corporate trainer, I was a business to business, right? Had a business and I supplied businesses. And it's an entirely different ball game, even if you stayed in the business to business or B2B, when you shift to online, which most of us had to do during COVID. So for me, I shifted my business and we started Confidence Through Cabaret in that time. And that then became business to consumer. So the end user straight away making the buying decisions and being the kind of key client. And so we talked about that, Maggie Periton and we talked about Maggie's advice for copywriting. And really branding overall. So tone of voice is a very important part of it. And whether you're typing posts out or whether you're actually speaking on lives or on podcasts, that tone of voice really sets the scene for your branding and it needs to be consistent. And so we talked about social media and around, making videos and how your branding comes out in especially in terms of your copywriting and your tone of voice. And then we moved on to August and we had the wonderful Ziza Natur. And we talked about public speaking and about using your voice. And I know Ziza talks a lot about, warming up your voice, how to project your voice, and how to come across. And that is so important because if you're going to be able to build a connection and a know, like, and trust factors with your audience, you're going to need to sound credible. And I do a lot of work around body confidence and around feeling good and accepting your body for how it is and who you are in the moment. And again, that's one of those barriers. And so I loved the conversation with Ziza because we were talking about voice and we were talking about engaging with your audience and making sure that you don't have those barriers that really could cause your ideal audience to question whether they should trust you and whether you're the right person to work for. And we shared vocal tips, or Ziza shared vocal tips. I was a complete learner in that point. We also talked about handling rejection and also about toxic positivity, which is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I engaged in toxic positivity for, well, I can't remember a time when I wasn't engaging in toxic positivity until fairly recently, and doing a lot of shadow work and doing a lot of, going back into where these beliefs and where my connection to those beliefs came from. So we talked about toxic positivity and the fact that we're allowed to say. And this was one of the biggest benefits for me of leaving, of not being involved so much in the corporate world, but being involved more in the business to consumer, and really being able to reach my audience directly, was that I was allowed to be vulnerable. I was allowed to share my story. I was allowed to have bad days, and those are all things that I never would have dreamed of doing when I was, in the corporate world, because I was being paid to be the conference leader or to be the coach for others. And so that vulnerability wasn't accepted, or certainly not encouraged in that environment. And so we shared that, our stories there around that in order to engage with our audience. And then we had the wonderful Katie, and I'm going to say your name, Katie, and I'm going to try, but I know you gave me coaching. I'm going to try it. So this was Katie Jargvide. I'm not sure. And Katie is a mom. She's a YouTuber. She has several YouTube channels, and she was talking about how to encourage and inspire people and connect with people, most especially on your YouTube channels, and then the use of other socials to feed into that YouTube channel, and the authentic journey of discovery that we are all on, and the recognition of that. And I'm really taking a leaf out of your book here, Katie, because I'm doing this. I don't usually do podcasts on my own, and certainly when I'm recording something, ideally I'm live, so I'm with other people. So that journey of discovery is about trying different things, and about engaging in learning from that time. And then we had the wonderful Gabrielle Critchlow, who runs a tutoring business in the United States. And I was listening to the story, and I was thinking how inspiring it was, and how that tutoring business of helping, especially but not only, young people to be able to really come into their own, and be able to achieve all that they can be. And I was thinking, how does that engage with confidence? I mean, obviously it's raising people's confidence that are engaged in the tutoring business, but then Gabrielle made it just make sense for all of us, which was about encouraging and inspiring people to channel what you have and be who you can be. I mean, who doesn't want or need that, to engage and channel what we have and be all that we can be? And I love that message. And I love the story that Gabrielle shared about coming to that message and starting the business. And then we had Alex Penna, who I refer people to all the time. Hopefully they reach out, because I really, when we started Confidence Through Cabaret, and most especially with the Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast, we wanted to be collaborative, where we would find not just guests that were interesting, that people would engage with, but also that people would want to collaborate with. And, so I truly believe in collaborative relationships and sending people to our guests if that work serves them and that is the right solution for them. And Alex talks about the fear of technology, and how we use technology to enhance our business, but we do it one step at a time. And I wish that I had Alex in my business when we first started, because I wanted everything now, like all of it, the whole thing launched instantly. And I mean, if we just look at, I'm recording this on StreamYard, if we just talk about StreamYard, I, even in the last 2 weeks, I've learned so much about scheduling it, and about how it appears on YouTube, and how to make it come up in socials in different ways. And if I had known and investigated and taken a whole year of looking at understanding the technology and then trying to produce a podcast, I never would have done it. So we started one step, and then we made another step, and we learned and we grew. And instead of spending that year researching, which would have made me crazy and not eventually have a podcast, we spent that year practicing and learning and growing one step at a time. And I love that message. And just one more point on Alex's business. Alex is a very ethical business person, in terms of, some people will charge you, they'll run your website, for example, and they'll charge you a fee, and they'll always charge you a fee, and you might not know how to do it. I'm a believer in mastering as much as you can, if you have your own business, so that you have an understanding, and so that you know how to work with and brief suppliers in how to get the best for your business, and to stay in line with your strategy and vision. So When Alex figures something out for you, he then gets it started, and then you have the option to train or learn how to maintain it yourself, and off you go. And that is a fundamental basic, that we teach trainers who are starting out to learn how to train. Is I show you, I show you fast, I show you slow. You do it with me, and then off you go. That's the kind of the little mantra for the training world. And Alex very much lives with that in terms of enabling you to be able to run your own technology. Then we had September, and we had Ruth Alladay, and we talked about um, uh, mentoring and coaching. We talked about the art of selling. In fact, I just watched a Ruth Alladay video today, and I never fail to be inspired by it. And Ruth was sharing with us tips for selling her high ticket, or selling your high ticket offer, I should say, by talking about how she sells her high ticket offers, and most importantly, to show up boldly, and without that imposter voice. Now, if you've been around Confidence through Cabaret for a while, I do a ton of work around imposter voice and overcoming your imposter voice. I refuse to call it imposter syndrome, because although it is a voice that stays with you, it isn't an illness or something that should hold you back. It's something that you learned to control, and you learn to engage with in certain ways. And so we talked about showing up boldly without allowing that imposter voice to sabotage. Wonderful episode. And then we had Jennifer Sullivan, Jen's Penn. And Jen is, among other things, a ghostwriter, has her own ghostwriting business. And we talked about the importance of play, which was another theme that came up quite a lot during this season. And we talked about being open to messing up, right? So, I mean, that's how children are when they're playing. They mess up, and then they go back and they redo it, or they replay it, and they enjoy it as part of play. And it is part of building confidence. Somewhere along the line, we got a message that we're not supposed to play when we're adults, and that is not the case. And it is fundamental for building confidence, because, as I always say, you can have a good time, or you can do hard time. And no one wants to do hard time, not intentionally. Okay, so then we had Jackie Bird, and Jackie was talking to us about living your truth and claiming your power. And I love that message. That is so fundamental. So, again, with controlling our thoughts and those inner critic voice, but Jackie is comes at it from an artist point of view, because Jackie is a dance teacher and a choreographer, also an author, and a spiritual wellness coach. So, we talked about a really cool principle, which was about you know uh, living practice off the mat. Now, wherever your mat is, you can use that analogy. So we talked about, if you're into yoga, for example. And in yoga, we are breathing, and we are growing, and we are expanding, and we're living in the moment, and we're getting our thoughts, collected and in control. And then we finish the yoga, and then we go back into all this chaos, which makes no sense. So we talked about living those same principles that you enjoy, but living them throughout other parts of your life. And that is fully up our street in Confidence Through Cabaret, because we are all about transferable skills. Start from where you're strong, and then transfer it to where you need it. And then we had the wonderful Jade Matthews. Jade shared with us intuitive fitness around body and mind transformation, and the key message being progress over perfection. I love that. I mean, we talk in Confidence Through Cabaret about being perfectly imperfect, and that is just such a great way to say that: progress over perfection. And so, if you think about what I was just talking about with the podcast, if I'd have spent a year you know trying to research it and find out all there was, and observe, and ask questions, and be on all these forums and try things out, and never actually produce something, I would be making some progress, but I would be trying then to launch it as a podcast. See, there's a perfect thing. Now, in theory, I could go back and edit that little blunder out, or I could go back and edit out the dog noises that are happening, but I'm not going to, because we believe in being perfectly imperfect. We are all human, and this is real life, right? So we talked about breaking the patterns, and we talked about, the illusions of confidence, that, confidence is not a destination, as we talked about earlier in this episode. Then I had someone that I consider a true friend. Paula Shepherd was in the house, wrapping up September's podcast, and we were talking about leadership and values and what integrity means, and really kind of, taking that time not only to know your values, not only to revisit them, but also to understand what they actually mean, to define them. And so we talked about what integrity means, and we talked about, again, about the online versus corporate business. We have that in common again. And we talked about levels of learning, which you can go and check out in the podcast episode. But we also talked about beyond the hats we wear, and that came out of that episode. It just kind of came up organically, meaning that we are so much more than our labels. So try and introduce yourself to someone and not use labels for yourself. Try and try and introduce yourself without saying, I'm a partner and a parent and a, child of, daughter, son, whatever it is, or a sister or brother. Try and not introduce yourself. Oh, there's my dog again. He's just come back. And try and not use those labels, because in the ideal world, those labels eventually shift and change, and some of them go away. For example, if you're a parent, you want your children to grow up and become independent. And as difficult as that is to let them go, that was kind of the point. And so being a parent as in a full-time carer, that is a title that's ideally going to go away. Hopefully we retire and we don't only have this career and that job title, whatever it is, or that business. We get to go and explore other different things, right? So we're beyond the hats we wear. Those hats that we wear, that we take off and put on all the time, we're so much more than that. So try introducing yourself. Next time you're asked to introduce yourself as you without the titles. It's an interesting exercise, and not as easy as it sounds. And then we were into October. Now, in October, we featured a masterclass by Hope Pedraza on confidencethroughcabaret.com. So for those of you who haven't been around for very long, we have a member site on confidencethroughcabaret.com, and every month we put up a new masterclass and or workshop, and that can be anything from Hope Pedraza talked about self-care and the pillars of self-care. I learned so much on that masterclass, and really kind of having balance amongst the self-care. So it's not just self-care, it's self-care in terms of our finances, self-care in terms of our physical body, self-care in terms of our mental health, self-care in terms of our relationships. And there are more. And Hope shares with us, the full kind of discovery of each of those pillars and where we need to be focusing our attention at any given time. And there's a workbook with all of the master classes, including that one. We have somatic breathing, we have dreamscaping, we have lifestyle engineering, we have beliefs, we have personality profiling. We also have workshops like chair dancing. We have stage makeup and day into evening kind of personal makeup, and really kind of the idea of that, of playing with that and who you are and how that changes how you feel. I always talk about my pink lipstick. I feel different with pink lipstick. And so, kind of that play and what happens if you change that up. And so go check out confidencethroughcabaret.com if you've not come across it. There's lots of variety on there for you to get involved with. Then we continued in our podcast in October with our first podcast being with Haley Hayhurst, who did such a beautiful episode. As a mindset coach, we talked about technology versus mindset. So back to some of that technology stuff, but also around mindset and, really what it means to get started in a business and what it means to create momentum in a business, and how to add value in your business. And we talked about podcasting because both of us have coached several people to start a podcast. And for me, it's a very simple thing to coach. Like, I adore coaching the podcasting. There are lots of elements to it, not just the technology. There's also the mindset. There's also that voice piece and that, connecting piece. So there are lots of pieces, but it is very simple to get started and then to build momentum from there. Get in touch if you want to start your own podcast as well. And so we talked about showing up with your personality in order to connect with your ideal audience and grow your business. Then we moved on and we had Kate Benner the following week, who we talked about your inner critic and taking risks to overcome the gremlins that you have in your internal voices. And we talked about listening to your intuition. So clearing off some of those voices, because you can't hear your intuition if you've got those voices going on. And so we talked about motivation to take risks. And for me, motivation means willingness to put energy into something. And I think I did a confidence with coffee. So uh, every time I record a podcast episode, I also record a short 10 minutes or so episode on the YouTube channel. So if you're listening to this on the podcasts, then go check out Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel. And for every episode, there is a little piece. I choose a clip and I talk about that. And I believe that with Kate Benner's, I talked about motivation and being willing to put energy into something, because I don't want to hijack the podcast episodes with my own points of view all the time or my own experiences all the time. But sometimes I have more to say on a subject that comes up, or it triggers something, and I said, I'll get on the Confidence with Coffee and I'll be saying, I loved this piece and I learned so much from this, and here are my reflections, and for what it's worth, just to get you started on applying the information as well. So do go check that out on the Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on vodcast, on podcast, there are also vodcast episodes, in other words, video episodes of every episode of the podcast. So you can check out the vodcast playlist as well as the Confidence with Coffee, and you can search by each of the guests' names. So then moving it through October, we had a 5-week month in October. So we had Frances Mary, who is a beautiful singer-songwriter, among other things. And we talked about the importance of names and the identity that goes on with names. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, you will know that I always ask the guests, if you're performing in cabaret, what would your performance be? I always ask the guests, what one prop would you want with you and why? And then what is your stage name? And that name ignites an energy and a voice that is powerful. So go and listen to the episodes and you'll hear the answers that each of the guests have given, but you'll also have an opportunity to try that for yourself. I highly recommend it. So we talked about being seen as vulnerable, again, a theme that's coming up here, but we talked about exploring your shadow self. And for those of you not familiar with shadow self, it's a concept that is mainly comes from Carl Jung, where if you can imagine that I've actually got a light coming in behind me, but if the light is in front of me, it's going to cast my shadow behind me. And most of the time we're not aware of that shadow, or we're not able to access that shadow. And so we talked about doing that shadow self, because we all have a shadow side. And we talked about doing that work and what came up for each of us, and the masks that we hide behind. And oh my goodness, yeah, the mask that we hide behind is a common theme, as you would expect with cabaret, of course. But we often do hide behind masks. I hid behind the mask of toxic positivity because I was emotionally frozen for decades. So I am comfortable to share that now. It's difficult to tap into the feelings. It's difficult to have the highs and lows. I did not have those. I had a consistent kind of, it's almost like a noise, just all the way through. I was always up, never switched off. My friends used to joke about the fact that I was a robot, because I was in that frozen side and I was behind a mask. And once you tap into that shadow self, and once you start to release that, you start to realize that you're safe, that there are other wonderful, valuable things that fill us up instead of holding on to that tension and that emotion. And so we talked a lot about that, and we also talked about the mindful moments of being literally on a stage. Frances Mary as a singer, myself as a cabaret artist, and so it was a lot of fun to be able to share those stage moments. Um, excuse me. Perfectly imperfect. Here we go. That's human. Then we had Kelly Rolfe, and Kelly talked about self love, and I adore Kelly's work. We talked about the feminine energy, and I had heard of feminine energy. I knew what it was, but in my frozen stage, I did not access the feminine energy because that is where our intuition and our creativity and our feelings and all of those things come up and we have access to. And in the corporate world, very often it's about doing, and it's about results, and it's about drive, and it's about all the things that are considered to be masculine energy. And this is not gender specific. We all have feminine and masculine energy. And so we talked about this, Kelly and I, and Kelly is the first person who's ever said, that she considers play a value. And I have had numerous discussions with people who've said play is not a value. Play is not a value. It is a value. It's one of my values for sure. And people keep saying, oh, maybe you should use the term joy or, happiness. Not for me, it's play. And play helps me tap into my feminine energy, which is so empowering. And speaking of empowering, we talked about the importance of play and fun, but we also talked about the difference between an empowered and a disempowered warrior. And, really being able to trust ourselves. So that was the episode with Kelly Rolfe. And then we had November already. It just like flew by from the summer into November. And we kicked off November with another body mind coach who is such a beautiful soul, Albany Busby. Hi, Albany. And we talked about self-love and self-acceptance. And I don't know what happened during that episode, but my whole world kind of just opened up, and I thought, we are talking about exactly the things I've been talking about, but in so much more articulate a way. So we talked about radiating energy, and we talked about journaling practices, and I began or reignited my journaling practice in November. So it was the perfect kind of time, and I would imagine that it was the catalyst for it as well. I've tried lots of different techniques and lots of different timings, and do I journal in the evening or the morning, and what kind of questions do I guide or do I not, and so on. And I've had so much progress from my journaling practice, and that started at the beginning of November, perhaps not coincidentally with the Albany Busby episode. But we talked about intentionally committing to you and getting past shame. We also talked about what true beauty is, and what it means to feel whole. So go and check out that episode. We both do a lot of work around body confidence and body image and accepting. And I don't know if you know this, but you can want to be a different size or different shape or different way and still accept your body today. Like, they can coexist, right? So you might find this, I'm recording this just after Christmas, so a lot of people in January are going to say, oh, I need to go on diets, and they're going to start promoting that in all the shops and all the media, and it makes me crazy. But you can want to be a different way, and that starts with accepting yourself today. Because if you don't accept yourself today and you try and go it through willpower, it isn't sustainable. Because if it was sustainable purely with willpower, then the diet companies would be out of business. Anyway, moving on from the Albany Busby beautiful conversation around self-love and self-acceptance, we then had Harrison Barron, and we talked about building confidence to put yourself out there into the mainstream. And we talked about monetizing your podcast and how that works. And we talked about, do you want what you have? Because if whatever you want, I love this, you do not need permission. And I cannot tell you how aligned with Confidence Through Cabaret that statement is. You do not need permission. We always say, don't apologize, don't explain. So Harrison took us through building your brand through using different outlets that you can't monetize or build your podcast solely as a podcast. You do need other outlets, other social media platforms, and so on. And then we had Jackie Ray Neiman Jones, and Jackie was a child star. I think she was 6 when she starred in Manos Hands of Fate, which is revered as one of the most, I don't know if awful's the right word, but critically acclaimed, terrible horror movies. So much so, and I did a lot of research after actually because I underestimated how big this was, but so much so that there have been several. There's been a stage show. There've been various. There's been a puppet show. There's been all kinds of different things that have gone on and endured the Manos Hands of Fate. And it was fabulous because Jackie and I were talking about her work as an actress, but also as an author, also as a promoter, also as an artist, and so many other projects. And then Jackie made the comment, I would love to do burlesque, when I asked the cabaret questions, and said if I wasn't so old. And we got into a for your age discussion. And I can tell you now, Jackie to this day is still working on her new burlesque routine around Manos Hands of Fate. And I am so up for that. I can't tell you how proud I am of that for Jackie. We talked about validating our own experience and around intuitive energy and empathy, and an art form, art from our own inspiration. And so again, we're back to that feminine energy that's kind of been a theme through a lot of the episodes. Moving on in November, we had Emmy Kirshner, who talked about values and boundaries. And, in Confidence Through Cabaret, we call it the B word because I am always on about boundaries. I love a conversation about boundaries. And so we talked about those boundaries, and be warned, if 2022 is your year of boundaries, that's wonderful. But the people who are not used to you upholding your boundaries are going to push back a little bit. So just in your preparation and planning, that's an important thing. We talked about vision and long-term goals, which is perfect for this time of year. So go check out the Emmy Kirshner episode if you're setting up your new year. Whatever point of the year, that can be done at any time. That's not just a January activity. We talked about aging again and the for your age, which makes me crazy. That those 3 little words, for your age, my least favorite 3 words. We talked about 5 key strategies, and Emmy shared with us 5 key strategies of being a democratic dictator. And Emmy shares with us how she uses this in her business, but also in her family. And it's just a wonderful conversation, and it's great when you meet people and you're so aligned with them right away. And that has happened to me pretty much every single episode. I just was like, I feel like I've known you for years because our values are so aligned, our messages are so aligned, and the for your age blew my mind. I loved that conversation. We also had the beautiful Kelly Lupton, who did the lifestyle engineering masterclass on confidencethroughcabaret.com. Go check that out. Complete with a workbook, a beautiful presentation by Kelly. But we filmed, actually we recorded this one live, and this was about facing our fears and overcoming the need to know how. And Kelly is in the Confidence Challenge group that I run, which is a free group for anybody who's ready to take action and wants some support and accountability around kind of engaging in what it is that they want. And we talked at length for a long time, probably nearly a year, about Kelly starting a podcast. And then all of a sudden that happened in a matter of weeks, and would have happened sooner if there weren't already other commitments on the schedule. So Kelly shares with us about facing fears and overcoming how, and doing things that we deserve to build confidence. So as a lifestyle engineer with an engineering background, and then as a lifestyle coach, it's just a beautiful symmetry between those, or synergy. That's the word I wanted. Again, perfectly imperfect, not editing it out. Then we finished we finished the year with our December podcast. Lindsay Peterson kicked us off, and in that episode we talked about how to stop surviving. So I went back and listened to this episode 2 more times after filming it live because there was so much in it and I just couldn't take it all in because it m made me realize at different times it gave me an explanation at different times about what was going on for me in those times. So we talked about how to stop surviving and be calm and confident and connected, and I love this, getting beyond stuck. And so we talked about that kind of survival mode where we're in that fight, flight, or freeze, which we all have and we all need. But it's, how do we move out of that? And the key to it being that we need to be able to say, yes, I am safe. And then we can move into possibilities and then we can move into thriving. And I'm really not explaining it as well as Lindsay does, but it really was about calming techniques to move out of that survival mode. And I had always described my 2.5, 3 decades around being frozen. But what I hadn't done, and I understand fight, flight, or freeze, that's my background is in psychology. I understand that. However, it hadn't occurred to me that that stage I described my feelings as frozen was me being in freeze, right? I was in survival mode for decades. And I hadn't put the word frozen and freeze together, which sounds ridiculous now, but that episode just kind of opened my eyes up of that's what was going on. I now have words around that because I understand that and I can recognize when I'm back in that stage. Then we moved on to Deanne Wheeler, 3 tips to manage the holidays, which I would say those tips apply any time of the year, not just in the holidays, but perhaps most especially in the holidays. And we talked about checking in. So that journaling or meditation with just a recognition of, when we wake up, today I am, or right now I am. I mean, it could be now, it's evening as I'm recording this, it could be at any time. So that kind of, I am angry, I am cold, I am hungry, I am afraid, and really recognizing those feelings and allowing them and letting them flow. So journaling, meditation, those kind of things help us to be able to just let it flow, not forcing it away, just being in the moment and seeing it and having that one thing at a time. And the importance of space. Actually, I am hungry. I can hear my stomach growling. The importance of space around us and the importance of finding our own space as well. So 3 tips to manage the holidays was Deanne Wheeler. And then we had Ilona Lipari, and Ilona shared with us scaling your business. So again, there was some common thread around moving from corporate to online. I seem to attract those guests because I really understand them, and what it takes to build a successful business online. And so Ilona talked to us about our inner voice and around being whole and starting from intention. That is such an important one. And you'll hear this everywhere. What's your intention? What's your why? What do you do? But intention, I mean, everything that, even a comment, it's what was your intention behind that? Because if your intention was genuinely to be funny, then that's different than your intention was to be undercutting or undermining or sarcastic, in some way aggressive, or so even just a little comment, it can be what was your intention, and really knowing what your intentions are, and then so we understand ourselves always before we can understand others. And so then creating that mindset growth, and then we talked about creating your own affirmations and how that looks in order to have the right mindset to build and scale your online business. Then we had Denise Wester, and Denise finished us up for the pre recorded podcast episodes. And we talked about journaling to unpack your past. We talked about creating scripts of intentions. See, there was this intention, which is such a beautiful thing to do, not only at the end of the year, but especially at the end of the year. And we talked about what motivation is. Again, we talked about gratitude and practice not being perfect. See, these are common themes that come up, but as each guest applies it to their own story and their own area of expertise, it's just such a great toolkit to have. We talked about getting curious, and that we spent quite a lot of time around the power of intention. And so what you're putting out there will come from that space of intention. And so if my intention is to connect with you, I'm going to show up in a really different way than if my intention is to tell you what I think. Right. So that there's an example of that. So go check out Denise Wester. And then we had 3 episodes that we filmed live for Confidence Through Cabaret community. Go check that out on Facebook and get involved with that. We do a lot of supporting and uplifting in that community. It's a very safe space. And Catherine Niesel talked to us for 3 consecutive weeks, sharing the Soul Success Code series. And we talked about fear of failure and visibility. That was week 1. We talked about why doing doesn't lead to desired results and why strategy won't help. And then we talked about fear of success. And Catherine is a qualified hypnotherapist and did a trance piece in there, which was beautiful. And I have gone back and listened to that 2 more times as well. And you'll find that on the recordings because it's up on the podcast. It's also under Vodcast on the Confidence Through Cabaret playlist. So we now have over 60 episodes up on our podcast, Confidence Through Cabaret, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to listen, especially while you're on the move, it's a great way to go. And then on the Vodcast playlists, those same episodes are up. Also, Coffee in the Community has quite a lot of our live. In fact, it has all of our live, but it has quite a lot of the podcast episodes were filmed live, and those are on the Coffee in the Community because they were filmed in the Confidence Through Cabaret community. And then we also have the Confidence with Coffee, which is where I'm doing a 10-minute or so segment around each of the episodes. So hopefully this has given you like a nice little kind of taster for what we've done just in these last 6 months. Go check out. There is also a season 1 wrap up, which was January to June of 2021. So again, if you just kind of want a taster and you don't know what you want to hear or who you want to hear, or the description isn't really, you're not into reading all the descriptions, then just go and listen and it'll give you a nice little taster. But also you can see from these episodes that there are common themes coming up. So there are common themes around intention. There are common themes around permission, and there are common themes a lot about mindset and around messing up or not being afraid of failure. Your inner critic is another common theme that I'm noticing as I'm talking through all of these episodes. So the more that you can listen to the different voices and different expertise of people sharing for free, sharing their time and their energy and their expertise to connect and share with you, then the more richness we can all be sharing, because you'll get so much more out of this. Thank you for being part of the Confidence Through Cabaret podcast. Thank you to all of our guests. Do check out our podcast if you're on the YouTube channel, and do check out our YouTube channel if you're on the podcast. All of our socials are Confidence Through Cabaret. So we are very active on Facebook, most especially, and the second place would be Instagram. And the only place we are not Confidence Through Cabaret is on Twitter, which is at YBYWYS. And Clubhouse, I am at Heather YBYWYS, and those 6 little letters stand for our beautiful catchphrase and our beautiful motto that we live by, which is that it is your body and it is your world and it is your stage. Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.